So conservatives have actually had a fairly positive reaction overall to Nelson Mandela. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, look, as we explained at the end of last week, a lot of conservatives are now doing what they did with Martin Luther King. What are you talking about? Martin Luther King would have been on our side. And Nelson Mandela, of course it was a Republican, except for the fact that he was a communist Marxist outside of that. Now, so I'm referring to the Republican leadership in this case, which has actually been fairly positive. Now, Newt Gingrich said nice things. Even Ted Cruz said nice things. Marco Rubio, Boehner, Cantor, etc., right? So good for them, and I'm giving them credit for that. Now, a lot of their followers, not so much. So they would put up, the senators and the politicians would put up nice things on Facebook, like, oh, regret the passing of Nelson Mandela. He was a hero to not just to his people, but to the world, etc. So good for them. Here's one commenter from Ted Cruz's Facebook page that apparently did not agree. It's Dan Noxon. He says, why don't all you Mandela lovers head on over to South Africa and see what's going on now that Mandela's people have control of the nation? No staying in palaces a la Sean Penn and other entertainers. Get out and mix with the people. Experience what life is really like, especially if you're white. Yeah, no, it's true. Like I don't know if you heard the news, but after Mandela took over, remember he was the president of the country, they murdered all the whites. They're gone. Or perhaps they did the exact opposite, and that's why he's beloved, that he actually forgave and there was no mass punishments at all. In fact, and what Newt Gingrich talks about is he had, and what of course a lot of us progressives mainly talk about, is that he actually took his prison guard. Remember, he's in prison for 27 years under apartheid, and sat him on the front row when he was getting inaugurated. The whole message of his presidency was forgiveness, truth, and reconciliation, right? But apparently that was lost on some of the conservative commenters. And look, you can't, like I said, I already gave credit to the Republican politicians, and you can't hold some of the commenters as responsible for the entire conservative movement, but there were a lot of comments in this direction. So here we go to now from Marco Rubio's Facebook page. Karen Beth Volpita says, for someone whose family fled communism, fled the very things that Mandela stood for, I'm sad to see you revere this man. Now, actually, if you're Cuban American and you're right wing, this makes a tiny bit more sense because Nelson Mandela did support Fidel Castro as late as the 1990s, saying, hey, you know, he stood up for his own people. So, okay, I'm trying to be as open-minded as I can here. Are they going to take it over the top? Well, of course they are. Here's Cristina Ilana Casas Mandola. Wow, Marco. He was a communist terrorist man. Sounds like Bush. Communist terrorist man. I like that. I'm going to use that from now. You won't be getting my vote, because you're just plain ignorant with no cojones. LOL. Which is kind of a surprising end to that otherwise angry message. And I like the implication. If you had balls, you'd of course hate that black man who freed the blacks in South Africa. It's obvious that you're being PC by saying you like him when obviously none of us like him because he's a communist terrorist. Okay, now
you didn't pick up on the funny because it was Marco Rubio. He doesn't have cojones. Comprende?
Oh, I see.
That's where the laughing out loud comes from.
Oh, see, I get it. So that's what the joke is. Like, yeah. See, you're Latino, so I threw cojones in there. Oh, clever. Thank you, JR. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known to laugh out loud. Now I do. Okay, now we go to the reaction for Eric Cantor and John Boehner. Now I'm going to say for the fourth time, they said the positive things. These are their commenters. Phil B. Liberty, which I suspect might not be his real name, says, the mass murderer Mandela is finally dead. While he did some statesman-like things as president in the 1990s, which, by the way, was not being a mass murderer, didn't kill people, that was pleasant. He and his animal of a wife were mass murderers and torturers. South Africa is still worse off under a Marxist government than it ever was. But wait. It's under a Marxist government? What happened? Did they seize all the property of white folks in South Africa? Did they do mass murder of white folks? Oh, no, right. They did the exact opposite. They didn't seize their property at all. They certainly didn't kill them. See, again, one of the reasons Mandela is actually revered. But apparently they missed all of that. Okay. Now, it gets simpler. Bob Hewitt-John says, from your comments, does it mean you support communism and the killing of white people? He had an opportunity to kill white people when he led the country. He didn't do it.
He had an opportunity to be Marxist, Maoist, communist, take all the diamond and the minerals and everything in South Africa and give it to the black people.
Except he didn't do it. I like how you missed a couple of decades of history. All right, finally, James M. Burt makes it the clearest. Glad he's dead. Okay, well, we see where you're coming from. We're not quite done here because I'm going to come back around to the positive Republicans. Not yet, though. Newt Gingrich also had a negative reaction on his social media. On his Facebook page, Thomas Hicks says that Mandela was a communist socialist. Okay, well, that seems relatively benign given the rest. And then, of course, Maria Emanuel says, quote, Mandela was a commie murderer. Now, here's me coming back around to credit the Republicans in this case. Because listen to Newt Gingrich's defense of Mandela here. And I'm going to tell you something interesting about Newt Gingrich's past with Mandela as well. But he makes a very good case here. Watch.
What do you make of this backlash?
I was very surprised by it. So I wrote my newsletter at Gingrich Productions on Friday. Basically, I entitled it, What Would You Have Done? And then you get the takeover in the late 40s by the very, very aggressively, I would say savagely, pro-apartheid party, largely Afrikaans. And all of your options are gone. I mean, you're now up against an oppressive dictatorship, which if you're African, if you're black, means that you are going to be, in effect, in a police state. That after 27 years in prison, he doesn't come out bitter. He doesn't come out angry. He comes out as an extraordinarily wise man who actually invites his prison guard to sit in the front row at his inauguration as president.
So it's such a good point that John Iadarola had made that point at the end of last week here on the Young Turks. He said, look, under a police state, what do you think the right wing would have done? First thing they would have done is grab their guns, right? I mean, that's what they tell us every single day. Oh, sure, government, they're not going to take my guns away. I'm going to grab my guns. I'm going to defend myself. So when Mandela did that in the beginning, when he was younger, right? Commie, terrorist, murderer, how dare you grab your guns? What would you have done? And by the way, Obamacare, not quite apartheid, as Rick Santorum claimed. I mean, because President Obama is trying to give people health care, you're ready to grab your guns. What would you have done if they said, hey, let's just take an ethnicity here randomly. White people, you no longer can vote. You have no freedom of travel. In fact, you have no freedoms. You are now inferior to the other races in this country, and the government will discriminate against you. What do you think those good right-wing white folks in this country would do? You think maybe they might grab a gun or two? And now, of course, they say Mandela's the bad guy. Again, he ran the country. He had all the guns in the world. He could have done anything he wanted with them. And he didn't kill anybody. He did the exact opposite. He liberated his own people and protected the minority, which in South Africa is white folks. Finally, one more from Newt Gingrich.
Who do you think these folks are?
Look, I think there are some people who bought a rationale that defined everybody who was in any way in rebellion against the established system in the third world as anti-American, which I in fact don't think they were. I think that in many cases, we were the symbol of what they wanted. We were the kind of country they wanted to become. But I do think there are people who have sustained this kind of mythology. And there's no question that in the 50s, Mandela moved from a non-violent model towards being allied with the communists. And my point to conservatives is there weren't any conservative allies. I mean, Churchill allied with Stalin during World War II. And I think in a similar tradition, Mandela was desperate by that stage. He saw the scale of the oppression. And the only allies that were available, frankly, were on the hard left.
So another really interesting point, because what's not getting a lot of play is that there weren't, as he just said, any allies on the right. For example, Ronald Reagan, who was around and the president of the United States of America. And when Congress passed a law saying that the apartheid government of South Africa should release Nelson Mandela, Reagan said, hell no. He vetoed that law. You know what's interesting? That man you just saw, Newt Gingrich, also voted against that. He voted against freeing Nelson Mandela. But to be fair to Newt Gingrich, he then led a turnaround within the Republican Party. He was one of the three that led the charge to say, you know what, we were wrong. We've got to make sure Mandela is free and so also end the apartheid government of South Africa. So, hey, listen, just like Mandela once took up violence and then took up nonviolence and executed on nonviolence and brought great peace and democracy and liberty to South Africa, give credit to Newt Gingrich, not on that whole spectrum, but on this one thing where he did turn around and support Mandela when it mattered, unlike Reagan and the rest of the right wing. So, and good arguments in this case as well. Rare credit to Newt Gingrich, though, of course, within Republican circles, that has apparently cost him.